Attachment confirmed. Take care when leaving the station.
Surface scanned by 50%. Surface scan complete.
Individuals, Tanner.
Our species has been banding together to fight the outsider since we lived in caves. We stand against the lawless, the invaders, and the monsters. And we're proud to do it. But you have to remember one thing. Nobody in the history of conflict ever saw himself as a monster. Everyone believes they're the hero of their own story. If you can't understand that, if you can't stand in the enemy's shoes, even for a second, and ask yourself why he thinks he needs to kill you, then you don't know what it means to be a soldier.
Tanner, addressed to Federal Cadets, 3298. Admiral Tanner is a senior officer in the Federal Navy. He has served for more than 4 decades, and in 3303 was given significant responsibility in the struggle against the Thargoids, first being appointed to Chief of Federal Security and later to Chief Military Liaison for the Cross-Superpower Initiative, Aegis. He is widely respected, even outside of Federal space, for his conscientious and level-headed approach to conflict. Born in 3254, Tanner was expected to follow in the footsteps of his authoritarian father by becoming a doctor, but instead enlisted in the Federal Navy, along with a group of friends, in what he would later describe as a rash act of adolescent rebellion that I have not once regretted. Tanner's father died in 3277. The two never resolved their estrangement. Tanner's early naval career was anything but distinguished. Known to his comrades in arms as Spoonie for his habit of eating directly from food packets instead of using plates, he was distinguished more by his irreverent sense of humor than his competence. 6 months in, Tanner was found to be responsible for a scurrilous newsletter that satirized several senior officers, including Sergeant Burke Hazel, who was offended and deeply hurt. Hazel had taken a personal interest in Tanner and had encouraged him to persist when the cadet had struggled with basic training. Tanner's defense that he had been trying to improve morale was rejected, and although he was allowed to continue his service, he was marked as a potential insubordinate, a label that would later return to haunt him. Tanner's chief instructional officer, Commander Myra Dunstock, warned him to take military life more seriously. She took Tanner to a refugee facility, an experience he would later characterize as showing him what the military is there to prevent. Tanner recognized a last chance when he saw it, discarded his role as camp comedian, and threw himself into his training with unprecedented energy. The decisive incident in Tanner's career was the Autolycus mutiny of 3271. At the time, Tanner was serving as chief gunnery officer on board the FDN Autolycus, a Farragut-class battlecruiser, under the command of Captain Jaden Horn. The ship was dispatched to restore order at Cold Harbor Station, which had been occupied by rebels following a descent into civil disorder. Captain Horn's orders were to monitor the station and await reinforcements, but when contact with the station was abruptly lost, he became convinced an attack was imminent. Surveillance footage later showed Horn acting in an increasingly erratic fashion. He screamed orders, slurred his words, and struck an ensign for making a minor mistake. Seeing a group of civilian ships preparing to leave the station, Horn ordered Tanner to open fire, convinced they were about to ram the Autolycus. Tanner refused to obey the order, claiming it was unlawful and that Horn was unfit to command. In the time it took for a furious Horn to have Tanner thrown in the brig, the escaping ships had jumped out of the system. At Tanner's court-martial, Horn tried to use his history of rebelliousness against him, but an explosive series of revelations followed. The escaping ships had been carrying evacuees, and the station's apparent silence was in fact due to Horn himself, who had disabled shipborne communications without telling his crew. Horn, who it would later emerge had been suffering from lexalamine-induced psychosis, committed suicide mid-trial by hijacking a fighter and detonating a grenade inside the cockpit. Tanner was exonerated, receiving a commendation from President Antonia Madison for his actions. Individuals. Aisling Davao.
My grandfather had an heirloom he used to keep in our winter palace. It was a priceless marble statuette of one of our ancestors standing with his foot on a woman's neck, while she looks up at him in fear or adoration, probably both. I loathed it. It was commissioned to commemorate some victory or other, but that wasn't the point of the thing. The message was clear, and it's the same one I've heard all my life. Deep down, the people we dominate are happy to be dominated. When I was 6 years old, I smashed it. The servants came running. My father stormed down the stairs in his gown. He asked if it was an accident. There was such a strange look in his eyes. I knew that if I said yes, nobody would argue. Nothing more would be said. But I didn't. I stamped my foot and said, "No, Daddy. I did it on purpose." It's the same with tradition. The people who pass it on think it's precious. They expect you to cherish it and pass it on in turn. But what they think doesn't matter, because the responsibility rests with you. If you know it's wrong, then you have to smash it. On purpose.
Aisling Davao. A fireside chat with Serena, 3301. Princess Aisling Davao, born in 3276, is a prominent member of the Imperial royal family. The eldest child of the infamous Prince Harold, she had a troubled upbringing. Her father was notorious for his hedonistic lifestyle, while her mother, entertainer Imogen Eccentrica Gabriellini, died from an aneurysm shortly after Aisling's birth. The autopsy identified the cause of death as an overdose of purple sunflake, an obscure and expensive narcotic, but conspiracy theorists insisted that she was murdered to remove an embarrassment to the royal family. Aisling has indicated that she is aware of these rumors, but has never commented on them. Despite living a life of great privilege, Aisling has publicly embraced the cause of the less fortunate and become an outspoken opponent of slavery, something that has made her the target of fierce criticism from more traditionalist Imperials. But despite this criticism, Aisling is a popular figure with a widespread media presence. Her campaigning has brought definite benefits to many of the poorest in Imperial society, and gone some way towards easing tensions between the Empire and the Federation. Her critics, however, dismiss her as a puppet, doing the bidding of a shadowy circle of advisors. They claim there is no underlying coherence to Aisling's policies. To them, she is a naive and sentimental child, without the necessary experience for politics, backing one populist cause after another, always conscious of how her activism is affecting her brand. Significantly, the most savage of Aisling's critics and the staunchest of her defenders agree on a counterpoint to this, that her apparent vacuity is nothing but a front, carefully created in collusion with the very advisors whom others believe are exploiting her. The People's Princess, they argue, is exceptionally good at being underestimated. Following the death of Hengist Davao in 3301, Aisling was considered by many to be a viable contender for the Imperial throne. As Aisling was born out of wedlock, however, and her father was removed from the line of succession on the grounds of mental incapacity, Arisa Lavinie Davao was deemed to have the stronger claim. Individuals. Albedo. Individuals. Albedo.
I may not be religious, but I still have faith. Not the kind my parents have. In fact, I don't think their desperate devotion can even be called faith. The point of faith is that it's tested. And if you insist that your beliefs are above criticism or analysis like the star cults do, you're refusing to allow your faith to be tested at all. What do I have faith in? The fundamental sanity of the universe, I suppose. I don't believe in absolute evil, only in the iniquity that emerges when understanding fails. I believe intelligent life will naturally tend towards cooperation rather than conflict, not because there's a higher power guiding our decisions, but because that's simply the most logical course. And yes, our recent experiences with the Thargoids have tested that faith harshly.
Albedo. Professor Albert Tesreau is an Imperial scientist, an affiliate of the Achenar Research Council, and a founding member of the Joint Superpower Initiative Aegis, which was established in August 3303 to investigate the Thargoid menace. She currently serves as Aegis's head of research. Tesreau's biological parents were members of the Besmeratu cult, an isolationist group secreted within a sealed compound that believed itself to have been chosen for salvation by non-human beings. The cult's charismatic leader, Anton Hotep, claimed humanity had been under the protection of these beings for millennia, that he was their cosmic messiah, and that only the believers would be saved from the coming apocalypse. In support of these claims, he often produced alien artifacts, allegedly sourced from archaeological digs that other cult members were never permitted to examine closely. Alba was marked as a troublemaker from an early age due to her heretical belief in rationality and the scientific method. She was formally banished from Besmeratu after she sabotaged the air purifying system, forcing the compound to call for help from outsiders and thus humiliating Hotep. After her story became public knowledge, she was adopted into the household of Senator Olivia Tesreau of Achenar and awarded a scholarship to study at Grand Imperial, alongside the children of the nobility. She wrote her master's thesis on the potential uses of mathematics as a lingua franca between human beings and intelligent non-humans. She is passionately interested in non-human intelligence and meaningful discourse between species. Despite the counterfeit alien contact myths of her early life, or perhaps because of them, she is determined to do whatever she can to act as a bridge between human and non-human cultures. Individuals.
Surface scan complete.
Individuals. Archon Delane.
I'll tell you, Delane is the most trustworthy cuss you could ever work with. Why? Because he always makes good on his threats. Anyone else tells you that they're gonna cut off your index fingers and hammer them into your sinuses with your own severed foot, you know it's just bluster. But if Delane tells you that, you know he'll do exactly what he says, to the letter. He wants people to be afraid of him, and that means he keeps his promises. You gotta respect that.
Mantle Hoek, arms trader. Archon Delane is the head of the Cumo crew, a powerful criminal syndicate. He refers to himself as the Pirate King, a title not recognized by any government. Delane's early life is not documented, and there are competing legends of his origin. Some believe he grew up in a drug den on one of the frontier worlds where he learned to fight. Other stories have him working as a bouncer in the brothel where he was born, or training as a grease monkey at an orbital shipyard that hosted clandestine arena fights after hours. What is certain is that Delane challenged and slaughtered the reigning pirate lord of the Cumo crew when he was only 15. The title of Pirate Lord is only transferred on the death of the incumbent, either to a nominated successor or to the victor of a ritual challenge. According to tradition, the Pirate Lord must honor any challenge to his leadership, regardless of who issues it, although the choice of weapons is left to him. In Delane's case, Pirate Lord Crab opted for a bare hands contest, a highly unusual choice. It has been suggested that Crab saw Delane as a weak target due to his albinism, unworthy of a Pirate Lord's personal attention. It is possible that Crab intended to give Delane a beating rather than kill him outright. If so, it was a fatal act of mercy. Footage of the fight shot by onlookers shows Delane deftly evading Crab's heavy blows, allowing the larger man to tire himself out before delivering a sudden jab to Crab's eye. Delane then battered Crab into submission, continuing to pummel the body until it was unrecognizable. The Cumo crew immediately split, dividing itself into those who saw Delane as a legitimate leader and those who refused to follow an unproven youth. The rift was soon closed, however, as Delane proved himself as capable a leader as he was a fighter. It became clear that Delane intended to establish not only his own reputation, but that of the crew. From then on, Delane crushed any dissent with the same uncompromising brutality he had shown to Crab. He took a zero-tolerance approach to the petty squabbles that had previously paralyzed the Cumo crew, and in doing so, turned what had been an anarchic band of opportunists into a lethally effective raiding force. United in purpose and more organized than ever before, the Cumo crew quickly became the terror of the Pegasi sector, absorbing lesser pirate gangs, raiding civilian stations with impunity, and taking over corporate facilities. In Delane's early years of leadership, many rival pirate lords demanded the right to one-on-one combat, each of them convinced that they would be the one to strike him down and take over his enviable criminal empire. Delane met each challenger in turn, agreed to their choice of weapons, and promptly dispatched them. After the death of Pirate Lord Horvath, who Delane strangled with his own razor whip, there were no further challenges. Delane and his Cumo crew rule by fear, but they operate according to strict rules. If a settlement in Cumo territory has paid us tribute, any Cumo pirate foolish enough to raid it risks being stripped of his rank, his crew, his possessions, his skin, and his life, according to the severity of the offense. These are the infamous 5 strippings, instigated by Delane as a standard punishment across Cumo territory. Individuals. Arisa Lavinie Davao.
I am a daughter, not just of the Emperor, but of the Empire. And I look upon our traditions and achievements with pride. I hold, as my forefathers did, that to be born Imperial is to receive the blessings of the universe. That is the true meaning of the ceremonial wine tipped upon our newborn heads. Does this pride in our heritage make me old-fashioned? Some would say so. I know that there are those in my family who cannot bear the burden of rank and privilege without a chronic sting of guilt. But I ask that you look charitably upon those so ailing, as I do. After all, rebellion is the prerogative of adolescence. I ask that you reserve your anger for a worthier target. For those who acknowledge our traditions in public, but privately serve only their own corrupt interests. For those who exploit their ancestors' sacrifices while holding our military in contempt. For all the petty, venal, spineless parasites in our very midst. I have sat with many such parasites, and for form's sake, I have masked my contempt. But that mask has served its purpose, and now I cast it aside. To the worms nestling so complacently in the heart of my beloved empire, I say this: we see you, and we are coming for you.
Arisa Lavinie Davao, private speech given at her post-coronation dinner. Arisa Lavinie Davao is the reigning emperor, having been appointed to the position by the Imperial Senate, and a direct descendant of the first emperor, Henson Davao. Her father was originally thought to be the late Prince Aristide de Lavigny, but Arisa's claim to be the illegitimate daughter of Emperor Hengist Davao has since been ratified by DNA testing. Arisa distinguished herself as a serving senator early in life. Unlike other senators who took their patron support for granted or left the work of intercession to a delegated representative, Arisa made a point of visiting and speaking directly with her patrons. Foremost among her concerns was how little scope for mobility the Empire offered. In theory, it was possible to rise in rank, but in reality, power was hoarded and loyal service went unrewarded. To her mother's horror, Arisa proceeded to go undercover as a slave in the Lagany household on Akana, talking to the staff and listening in on meetings. What she learned would change her view of the Empire forever. The rules could be broken with impunity, so long as the proper bribes were paid. A senator's favor could be secured, a corporation's accounts could be doctored, and an atrocity could be covered up for the right price. On paper, it might be a patronage system, but it operated as a de facto plutocracy. Arisa's experience as a slave also cemented her own view of Imperial slavery, namely that it was no worse than indentured servitude, and downright luxurious compared to what the Federation's lowest paid workers had to endure. Non-Imperial commentators responded by pointing out that slaves in noble households on Akana could hardly be held up as typical examples of slavery, and that Arisa might have learned more had she spent her time in a Mastopolos mining facility. Arisa has made no secret of her determination to restore the rule of law within the Empire. She means to purge it of corruption, and has received widespread public support for this cause. Unlike her niece, Aisling Davao, she sees the Empire system as inherently worthy, if impeded by long-term neglect. They need to be cleansed, not torn down and rebuilt, as per Aisling's wishes. As the first woman to serve as Emperor, Arisa is a controversial figure to many, regardless of her personal political stance. Many hardcore traditionalists within the Empire have vowed to depose her and replace her with a ruler more to their liking. Individuals. Denton Patrius.
What disgusts me? That's a perceptive question. By asking it, you reveal that you consider me a man of taste. If you'd asked me what I hated, I'm not sure I could have hidden my disappointment at such a banal question. But disgust, that deserves an answer. It's jealousy that most disgusts me. It's such a petty, self-defeating emotion. I see it every day. Most men look at me and think, I want what he has. Perhaps 1 in 1,000 thinks, how can I achieve what he achieved? Now, he's not jealous. He's motivated. Who knows? We might work together one day. But most men are not like that. They have the desire, but not the initiative. It's like a dog watching you eat and wishing he was a human. And that's the tragic thing about jealous people. They think they hate me, but really, they hate themselves. Because deep in their hearts, they know they're too lazy to fight for their dreams.
Denton Patrius, a fireside chat with Cerebra, 3302. Denton Patrius is a powerful Imperial senator and the Admiral of the Imperial fleet. He is a controversial figure, admired by many Imperials for his wealth and influence, but deeply unpopular in other quarters for his uncompromising approach to debtors. He is also noted for commanding one of the strongest private military fleets in colonized space. Patrius has repeatedly issued loans to struggling governments via shell companies, only to later hike up the interest rates. When the government defaults on the loan, a common occurrence, Patrius moves in to foreclose. Since few governments are able to match the power of his private fleet, this is usually a one-sided affair, although some governments have appealed for and received the aid of independent pilots. This strategy has brought numerous systems under the control of Patrius's various corporations. If Patrius has any long-term goals beyond increasing his personal power and holding the line against the Alliance and the Federation, they're not publicly known. Politically, he has always played the part of the loyal Imperial. He accepts the need for progress, and has devoted considerable attention to eradicating Emperor's Dawn, an insurgent organization responsible for the assassination of Emperor Hengist Davao. His support for the Empire has been well rewarded, and as Admiral of the Fleet, he enjoys an enviable level of prestige. But even this may not be enough, and many have speculated that Patrius harbors a desire to become Emperor. During the period of uncertainty that followed the death of Hengist Davao, Patrius suggested that the title of Emperor be assigned on the basis of public support, rather than lineal descent, a statement that was widely interpreted as a bid for the throne. When the succession passed to Arisa Davao by vote of the Senate, Patrius did not contest it. The question of who should succeed Arisa Davao is now a pertinent one. Imperial commentators have suggested that Patrius's highly visible courtship of Princess Aisling Davao may be part of a long-term strategy, as well as a piece of savvy media manipulation. Arisa Davao has no children, whereas a child born to a Patrius-Davao partnership could be an extremely strong contender for the throne. Individuals, Edmund Mahal.
Naturally, we faced criticism over the Lu conflict. Many people thought we should have been in there, guns blazing. On the one hand, you have a system that wants to be independent, and on the other, you have the oppressive Federation telling them no. The authorities in Lu put out a call for aid, and what did the Alliance do? We turned them down. That would never have happened on the Holos, would it? I would have been at the head of the Alliance fleet, taking down the Fed-Cap ship with a well-aimed torpedo up the tailpipe. But life isn't like the Holos. You need political and legal clarity. When Lu asked for our help, who exactly was doing the asking? The people? All right then, which people? Who counted their votes, and how was the process monitored? Was their decision an informed one, or were they bombarded with propaganda? The Alliance is rigorous, you see. You can't join a voluntary association of free systems unless you can offer demonstrable proof of your freedom to choose, just as you can't enter into a contract without being of sound mind, acting without coercion.
Edmund Mahon, responding to a question from Jessica Braganza, one of a party of schoolchildren visiting the Prime Minister's residence. Edmund Mahon is the current Prime Minister of the Alliance. The product of a corn-farming family based on Birmingham in the DSO system, Mahon was hard-working and shrewd from an early age, with a particular talent for negotiation. Nobody seemed able to beat his crop prices down, and he always managed to shave something off the asking price of any tools or machinery the family needed. In the first book of his autobiography, The Shadow of Silo 7, he attributes this talent to preparatory research, claiming that he always found out as much as he could about the people he would be dealing with before meeting them. At 18, Mahon won a federal scholarship to study law. Frustrated with what he saw as the imbalance of power between corporations and their employees, Mahon intended to specialize in cases of corporate exploitation. He quickly found, however, that the legal profession was not to his liking. Awash with duplicity, double talk, and corruption was his assessment, and he switched track to political science. 2 years into his course, and following an increasingly vocal series of broadcasts on a personal video channel in which he argued in favor of the newly formed alliance, Mahon's scholarship funds were abruptly cut off. He had unknowingly violated a clause that required him to refrain from public criticism of the federal government. Unwilling to return to his family without having made something of himself, Mahon had no choice but to look for work while continuing to study. The bar in which he had spent so many hours as a student was happy to take him on as a bartender, and he proved so competent that after his graduation, he took on the role of manager. Mahon claims it was this experience, rather than any innate idealism, that set him on the path to becoming a career politician. As he puts it, a good bartender has to be able to listen, and to give equal respect to everyone, while demanding that others do the same. He has to be able to distinguish what is meant from what is said, encourage free exchange of views while tactfully enforcing the rules, and, when necessary, break up fights. Mahon's break into politics came when his friends encouraged him to run for city office against the favoured corporate candidate, Jensen Crane. The Mahon campaign began as a token protest, since Crane was expected to win by a comfortable majority. Mahon eviscerated Crane in the live debates, however, winning over the audience with a combination of wry humour and an empathetic awareness of local concerns that Crane could not hope to match, living as he did in a high-altitude apartment complex. Crane was elected by a narrow margin, but Mahon's supporters begged him to continue in politics. So it was that, at the age of just 27, Mahon found himself working alongside elder statesperson Irene Mendel, helping with a campaign to break the DSO system away from the Federation and make it a part of the Alliance. By the time DSO joined the Alliance in 3286, Mahon was a seasoned parliamentarian. He served as a planetary representative several times before making his bid for the premiership. Individuals.
Mission critical message.
We have portraits of all the other leaders to accompany.
Individuals. Felicia Winters.
Politics has always been a breeding ground for lies. But one lie outshines all the others. And today, we heard it once again. It is the insinuation that to seek a diplomatic solution is weak. That a preference for discussion over conflict means we're afraid to fight. We are accustomed to this, of course. We've heard the President's supporters pervert our words again and again. When we face up to the Federation's previous wrongs, they mock us for our so-called liberal guilt. When we celebrate a détente between the superpowers that will help us oppose the Thargoid menace, they imply that we are traitors. But it is they who are afraid, and with good reason. Because the people of the Federation have had enough. They will no longer be manipulated into reckless conflicts that serve only to fatten the wallets of the arms dealers and the privileged. They will no longer pretend that Hudson's tub thumping and saber rattling is anything more than vacuous propaganda. From star to star, Connolly to complex, satellite to station, we hear the same heartfelt cry. Let the mistakes of the past remain in the past, and let the Federation embrace only the best of itself. Let us return to the core values of hard work, honest trade, support for the vulnerable, and mutual respect. The people are ready for us. Let us be ready for them!
Felicia Winters, Liberal Party Annual Address, 3303. Felicia Winters is the head of the Liberal Party of the Federation, and as such serves as ex officio shadow president, opposite President Zachary Hudson of the Republican Party. Winters was born and raised on Taylor Colony, one of the oldest human colonies, and worked for the Sirius Corporation before going into politics full-time at the age of 44. Her current role was thrust upon her unexpectedly. Prior to 3301, Winters was Secretary of State to then President Jasmina Halsey. When both Halsey and Vice President Ethan Naylor went missing aboard Starship One, Winters became acting president. The assumption of this responsibility left her visibly shaken, and despite her popularity in Congress, it was widely felt that she was not up to the job. The Liberal Party was in a state of crisis at the time following the Lu conflict. A group of forces had sought to make the Lu system independent from federal control, prompting a declaration of war from the Federation. Many of the party's supporters were shocked by President Halsey's decision to open fire on refugee ships
Surface scan complete.
during the conflict. According to reports, Winters had questioned the action, arguing passionately with her friend Halsey behind closed doors, while maintaining a front of public solidarity. Consequently, she found herself responsible for a party whose voter base had largely deserted it, and whose values had slipped out of alignment with her own. Shortly after Halsey's disappearance, Zachary Hudson called for an emergency vote of no confidence that he resoundingly won, resulting in his appointment to the role of president. Given the massive support for Hudson and the disarray among the Liberals, Winters was expected to resign and let the Liberal Party rebuild itself from the ground up. Instead, she threw herself into her work, leading efforts to persuade various systems not to defect to the Alliance, and distributing aid packages to planets in need. Her energetic and proactive approach led to fresh support for both her and her party, and she currently rivals Hudson in the popularity stakes. Individuals. Ishmael Palin.
If the history of eugenics tells us anything, it is that we do not tend towards greater egalitarianism over time, but rather find new ways for the privileged to exploit and control the dispossessed. Nevertheless, I do occasionally dream of ways in which we might evolve further. If I could change just one aspect of human nature, it would be our chronic tendency towards tribalism. In that matter, we have barely advanced a step in 1,000,000 years. While the sun shines, we meet and treat with one another, but when the skies darken, we withdraw and whisper suspiciously. And at the first flash of the unknown, we huddle like witless primates in a cave, terrified of the thunder, trusting only those who smell the same as us.
Professor Ishmael Palin, Memorandum to Students, 3289. Professor Ishmael Palin is a scientist specializing in research into non-human technologies and cultures, with a particular emphasis on material artifacts. He is generally considered one of the galaxy's foremost experts on the Thargoids. Professor Palin began his career working for the federal government as a member of the Homeland Scientific Council. In 3301, when objects apparently of non-human origin were discovered in a number of systems, the Federation launched a research program and placed Professor Palin in charge. To the surprise of many, the program was shut down after only a week, ostensibly on the grounds of safety. Palin refused to comment on the decision, but inside sources later revealed stark differences of opinion between Palin and the federal authorities. Palin
Surface scan complete.
insisted that the fruits of his team's research into the so-called unknown artifacts, later reclassified as Thargoid sensors, should be open to everyone, but his federal paymasters wanted the Federation alone to benefit. Palin promptly established his own research body, the Palin Institute, and announced his intent to relocate to the Maya system, beyond the boundaries of superpower-controlled space. His ship disappeared shortly after he set off for Maya, however, and it was not until March 3302 that Palin and his crew were discovered, alive, in escape pods in the Orlos system. Palin revealed that unknown parties had abducted the team, held them captive, and questioned them extensively about their research. Shortly thereafter, Palin stepped down as the head of the Palin Institute in favor of Cora Shaw, citing opposition to his work from dark forces as the reason. He established his own independent research center on Maya A3A and began to study meta-alloys, a material sourced from the Thargoid structures nicknamed barnacles. In October 3302, Palin discovered that meta-alloys could be applied to the development of new defensive technologies, but no sooner had the news broken than the Federation blockaded his research center with a Farragut-class battlecruiser, preventing all access. The move was condemned by the Alliance and the Empire, but the Federation appeared to take no notice. Almost a year later, in September 3303, the Federal blockade was lifted. No explanation was given either for the blockade or for its cessation. The event has since been interpreted as the beginning of the end of the Federal Imperial Cold War. Professor Palin's career has been an inspiration to many young scientists, partly because of his determination that research should benefit everyone, and partly because of his dogged tenacity in the face of repeated interference. He was aware that by choosing to study the Thargoids, he was making himself a target, since there were shadowy agencies who very much wanted to be the sole beneficiaries of this research. But he defiantly persisted with his work nonetheless. Professor Palin may not consider himself heroic, but the fact remains that many less principled scientists in his position would have long ago submitted to intimidation or the promise of material reward. Individuals. Jasmina Halsey.
I know what they're saying. They're picking my story to pieces. Some of the criticism is rational. The lack of corroborative evidence, for example. I don't mind that. I'm telling the truth, after all. An irrational approach can't hurt the truth. But when they say what I experienced is an archetypal conversion story, and that makes it suspect, if what I saw reminds people of historical accounts, doesn't that say something about those experiences?
Jasmina Halsey, 3302. Jasmina Halsey, a former politician, served as president of the Federation from 3300 to 3301. She now works as a peace activist and close advisor to Alliance Prime Minister Edmund Mahon. Halsey claims the profound transformation of her views is the result of a visionary experience in which she communicated with benign non-human life forms, an episode that allegedly occurred in 3301, following the destruction of her vessel, Starship One. Prior to the disappearance of Starship One, Halsey's presidency was unpopular among federal citizens. Taxes had been raised too many times, and her military interventions were seen as heavy-handed. A campaign to ban the narcotic onion head went awry when the crops were firebombed, resulting in collateral damage. During the Lu Rebellion, Halsey gave the order to fire on a civilian convoy, in the belief that a rebel leader was on one of the vessels. Many senior commanders in the Federal Navy lost faith in Halsey and transferred their loyalty to then Shadow President Zachary Hudson. Hudson called for a vote of no confidence in Halsey's government shortly after Starship One went missing and achieved an overwhelming victory. Though Halsey was later found alive, drifting in an escape pod, suggestions that she might be reinstated as president gained little support. Perhaps surprisingly, Halsey's account of her experiences has received a large degree of acceptance among the galactic community. But even those who accept her description of an encounter with non-human entities suspect there is more to the story than has been made public. Skeptics hold that the event presents too many unanswered questions, such as precisely what happened to Starship One, as well as offering Halsey a suspiciously convenient way out of her failing presidential career. The most scathing of Halsey's critics condemn her as a traitor and defector who was conspiring with Edwin Mahan even before she left the Federation, and who staged the Starship One catastrophe as a convoluted means of defecting to the Alliance, taking vital Federal intelligence with her. Halsey originally addressed these theories by emphasizing how incompatible they were with her behavior, citing her efforts to establish refugee centers for victims of conflict and her public condemnation of the Federal Imperial Cold War. But more recently, she has simply laughed them off. Individuals. Lee Yong-Rui.
The fortune teller rattling bones in her simple hut, the smiling insurance salesman with his snakeskin briefcase, and the data analyst with his interactive holographic model are all selling the same thing: certainty. One of the paradoxes of human existence is that we crave the freedom to be spontaneous, thinking it essential to our nature, while constantly seeking reassurance that nothing unexpected is going to happen. We flatter ourselves with the belief that we are exempt from the rules of modeling that govern the rest of the universe.
Introduction to Becoming the Watchmaker. Lee Yong-Rui's master's thesis on the innate human reluctance to accept behavioral predictability. Lee Yong-Rui is the Chief Operating Officer of the Sirius Corporation and its governmental subsidiary, Sirius Gov. Like many other members of the Lee dynasty, Yong-Rui came to the corporate world from an academic background, having achieved doctorates in multiple fields and specializing in extrapolating potential future situations from limited data. Although he is in many respects an innovator, Yong-Rui embodies the archetype of the healthy, energetic corporate executive, with little of the eccentricity that traditionally characterizes visionaries. A good deal of his popularity is attributable to his innate serenity and outward conventionality. Those who have worked under him describe him as radiating self-assurance and giving the impression that everything is completely under control. Yong-Rui has brought a similar sense of constancy to Sirius Gov, giving the citizens under his governance the impression that they can trust their government to do the right thing, a rare achievement for any administration. Yong-Rui has stated many times that he does not believe in the concept of chaos, holding that while order is objective, chaos is subjective. Since existence is fundamentally meaningful, any semblance of discord can only be the result of the observer's own failure to discern the underlying meaning. Although some might mistake Yong-Rui's views for a form of mysticism, he is a staunch materialist. He attributes his success in economics to his insistence upon viewing the universe, especially its human component, in clear and unsentimental terms. All human behavior, he believes, can be reduced to simple, quantifiable factors, ultimately predicted upon enlightened self-interest. This approach, as well as being laudably rational, allows for truly impartial government. Individuals. Pranav Antal.
If my ancestors could see me today, would they approve of what I've done? I doubt it. Enlightenment is supposed to be hard work. In theory, it's accessible to anyone, but in practice, only those who devote years of their life to meditation can hope to accomplish anything. To do what we have done, to democratize the spirit through technology, would look to my forebears like unforgivable laziness. But all things must happen in their appointed time. We now stand on the verge of overcoming the greatest obstacle to human progress there has ever been: the isolation of the human consciousness. Loneliness, misunderstanding, hatred. All forms of conflict result from this detachment. But our technology allows us to truly see the world through others' eyes. We can finally achieve what the mystics and sages have spent centuries striving for, and break down the fortress of the individual ego.
Pranav Antal. Pranav Antal is the leader of the Utopia movement, within which he's referred to by the honorific Sim Guru. Utopia is a visionary project with a goal to advance humanity scientifically, morally, and spiritually via the application of technology, with a particular focus on simulations, or sims, the digitized thoughts, emotions, and perceptions of another. Pranav inherited leadership of Utopia from his father, Rishi Antal. Rishi was the founder of Utopia and designer of the Sim Archive, a facility that allows the living to experience the digitized memories of the deceased. Although at present it is only possible to experience these memories passively, Pranav has mentioned the possibility of incorporating them into a simulated version of the individual, or data ghost, that could then be interfaced with, thereby allowing individuals to endure beyond death. In his youth, Pranav was expected to undertake a range of physical chores, despite the technological and material wealth available to his family, and has often spoken of digging vegetables out of the ground and rebuilding collapsed cultivation tunnels after a storm. At the time, he begrudged these tasks, but having since assessed his deceased father's memories, he now appreciates that the work gave him an understanding of how the disadvantaged experience life, as well as reminding him that humanity is dependent upon the material world and must not hold it in contempt. Pranav is generally considered more commercially minded than his ascetic father, prompting his critics to condemn him as a plutocrat, with only a superficial interest in Utopia's ideals. His supporters, by contrast, paint him as combining the wisdom of his father with a shrewd commercial nose.
Lincoln, Papa, Romeo, Oscar, please follow docking procedures, Commander, and enjoy your stay.
Regardless, both sides agree that Utopia has undergone significant change under Pranav's leadership. Pranav's prevalent concern, apart from continuing to expand Utopia, is the Acheron interface. His claim is that this project will allow users to translate their consciousness directly into data, thereby surpassing the limitations of the physical self.
Access permitted. Plot route for approach to landing pad 4-1. You're approved for automated docking sequence.
Commentators have expressed wariness, claiming the project steers unacceptably close to the development of artificial intelligence, which is prohibited throughout the galaxy. But Pranav's standpoint is that a system that translates intelligence into a new form, like the Acheron interface, not artificial intelligence, since the human being remains at the core of the process. Individuals,